right, so we are going to go to Liguria, which is on the coast of the Mare Ligure, the Ligurian Sea, which is part of the Mediterranean. You can see right here. And we're going to go to this area that is known as the Cinque Terre. I think most of y'all are probably pretty familiar with that. I have also marked this little dot. This is Popiano, which is where I live. I'll just show you quickly what that looks like. So I am at the Castle of Popiano, and I live in a little farmhouse, which is what you see there on the right, just outside the walls of the castle. And this is in Tuscany. So we're just southwest of Florence in what they call the Florentine Hills of Chianti. But we are going to go to the Cinque Terre. So you can see there are these 5 little villages that are, they obviously face the water, and I think you can kind of tell that there's some relatively impervious mountains back here. So they're kind of isolated. They are kind of a tourist destination. So I think most of y'all are kind of familiar with that. And the 5 villages are Rio Majore, Manarola, Corniglia, Vernazza, and Monterosso al Mare. So we are going to take a look at the villages. We are going to talk about an artist who was really inspired by the light and the environment here. And then we're going to look at the ecosystem, which is kind of particular, especially the way they farm these mountainsides. And then we'll make some recipes that are typical to this area. So here's the first village, it's Rio Majore. So all the villages were founded in the 1100s, the medieval period. They were under the umbrella of Genoa. So Genoa was this huge maritime empire back in the day, and these guys depended on Genova. And the cool thing here is that they're called terre. They're called Cinque Terre, which means lands. Okay, so they're not called Cinque Porti. They're not called the 5 ports. 5, of course, cinque is the word for 5. So the 5 villages are called the Cinque Terre, the 5 lands. And part of that has to do with the fact that they don't really there is no big port here. They just have these tiny little, harbors for tiny little, small craft. There's no big ship sailing in here. So even the galleys that they had in the medieval period weren't stopping here. There was no protected port. So they're on land. They're more land than they are sea. And then on top of that, they're also kind of dependent for their livelihood more on the land than the sea. They're literally more dependent on cultivating the land for food than they were for fishing in the sea. So most of their sustenance and income came from what they could grow on those very steep hillsides. So here looking at Manarola, I was actually here last week. So I kind of gave me the idea to do a pesto class. Here is Corniglia. The towns are so isolated that the urban plans are pretty much intact from the medieval period. They're very heavily touristed. I think y'all are probably aware of that, but the little villages pretty much exist the way they did. This is Vernazza. So they were, kind of little hubs of farming communities in the medieval period, and then from the 1600s, it just started to decline. Genova also kind of started to decline. They just it turned into kind of a little backwater. And then the train came through in 1874. You can see this is Monterosso al Mare, the westernmost village, and you can see the train line runs right here. There's the tunnel that goes through the mountain. So the train came in 1874, which in some ways, kind of relieved the isolation. So instead of having to take a boat or walk 3 hours to the next town over, you could actually get on the train and get there in 2 minutes, or go all the way to Genova or go to La Spezia. But it also opened up an escape route. So life here was really, really hard. So the people who were dependent on eking out a living on these super steep hillsides, as soon as the train came in, they're like, we're gone. We're going to move to the city and go work in a bank. Like, we're not doing this anymore. So off they went. So there was this big decline in the local population from 1874 on. And what really brought them back is tourism, which is kind of the double-edged sword, right? So in the 1960s, National Geographic published an article about this gorgeous little bit of coastline and these adorable little village, and that was kind of it. So tourism picked up and has not quit since. And I mean, it's a gorgeous area. I enjoyed going there as well. I kind of, any of y'all who've worked with me planning travel, I try to kind of, send you elsewhere if it's high season, because it's really, to me, it ranks up there as one of the most overcrowded destinations in all of Italy during tourist season. And it's to the point where it's a little bit kind of uncomfortably crowded. So it is gorgeous though, and people go for a reason because the landscape, the seascape's absolutely spectacular. The natural beauty, all the flora and fauna. It's fun to explore the little cities, the little villages. So I'm kind of giving you both sides of the double-edged sword. On the left, you can kind of see the cute little charming streets, and on the right, like that's what it looks like during high tourist season. So it's kind of not really good for the environment there either. Like these little towns just can't hold all that many people. So it's nice to go out of season. It's also nice to go to some other destinations in Italy. Here's another example of some of the. So these are just kind of day trippers who are just coming, stopping in. It looks kind of like Manarola, in just for a couple hours kind of thing. It is cute and charming, but again, it can get a little bit crowded. So we're trying to do more sustainable tourism over here, and going out of season is a good idea. So also in these little villages, they each have their own kind of Gothic cathedral. That's San Lorenzo and Manarola on the left, San Giovanni Battista, St. John the Baptist in Monterosso. They'll have their nice rose windows. Here's Rio Majore. There's a sanctuary way up above the village. You can actually hike up there. It's a nice hike. And you get up there and you get this great view of this kind of V-shaped Rio Majore down at the bottom at sea level. Just outside of the national park, this is another kind of nice way to visit this area. So those 5 towns are located on that section of coastline that we looked at, but you can keep going. There's still there's other towns, keep going sort of northwest and you hit places like Framura, where there's really nobody there except locals. And it's lovely, the walks are nice. It's very low key, there's not much going on, but it is, it's quite beautiful. And all the hiking trails pass through there. There's a little bit kind of, examples of, everyday life are still kind of more prevalent there. That green box that you see on the upper right, I was here, I want to say last year, it's like, we have to add a year because of the pandemic. So like that'd be 2 years ago. And this green box comes up to about waist high. It's in the piazza. And I kept seeing people stopping by. I'm like, what are these, random people going to this green box? And I went over there and it's the bread delivery. Isn't that cute? So this town is so small, there's even a bakery. The bakery's down on the coast. And so you hike down to the coast for your bread, or you just sign up, and I'm sure they have a running tab and they'll just leave you a loaf of bread or whatever you ordered. So that's how you get your bread delivered in Framura. So here's Manarola again. This is a nice spot for hiking, and a lot of people come here to go hiking. And if you're in Manarola, this is where you start and you go up. This is steps and it goes all the way up. And it's really gorgeous. It's a tough hike, but it's really beautiful. And you get those great views when you're up at the top. So the hiking is really kind of, dramatic scenery. Here are the trails. It's also really cool because you see how the farmers created these terraces that they farm on. And they're still working them today. So it's, you're literally walking through these fields and they're farmers working the vineyards. So another person who was kind of drawn to this area is this painter called Telemaco Signorini. And he's not one of the most well-known of Florentine painters. He's a guy who was born in Florence in 1835. He went to the Fine Arts Academy, so he learned how to do history painting, right? So really important people doing, participating in very important historical events and kind of these grand canvases and kind of a romantic style. That's what he learned how to do. His father was a court painter to the Medici Grand Dukes, and he was a view painter. So this is actually a painting of a view of Florence that was done by Giovanni Signorini and his son Telemaco. Well, Telemaco, when he was about 25, just kind of wasn't into this anymore, and neither were his friends. So he and his friends decided that they were kind of fed up with kind of the kind of stuffy history painting that they had learned at the Art Academy. What they really wanted to do was just kind of paint their impressions of the natural world and kind of do these poetic, sort of smaller poetic canvases, not these huge sort of important historical paintings. So they started working in this way where they were using kind of quick brush strokes and laying down color next to each, not blending their color so much, but actually like putting down swaths of color or even blotches of color. So there's not a lot of kind of blending going on. They're actually using splotches of color. They are kind of blurring the contours. There's a lot of kind of haziness going on here. They're also really interested in light, and they're actually painting outside. They go outside to paint because they want to actually see how sunlight works. So they're using light and swaths of color to create forms. And in those splotches of color in Italian are called macchie or marks. We talked about this before when we talked about Giorgione. He was criticized for using splotches. Well, these guys were criticized for using splotches as well. 1850s, they had an exhibition, and an art critic said, these are Macchiaioli. These guys are just painting splotches. And well, these guys were like, you know what, we are Macchiaioli, we like that. So they adopted this term. So they're known as the Macchiaioli Painters. So their idea was to paint the natural world, paint outside, and just, not use super high definition, but just kind of use their macchie, their splotches of color to kind of blur things into the background, kind of blur colors together. And they started doing this in the 1850s, 1856, I think. It was 10 years later when their colleagues in France who were doing similar things were named. They were named the Impressionists. So it's kind of a similar style. So 10 years after the Macchiaioli, the Impressionists came along. And they, of course, took that sort of optical effect of the blur a lot farther. If you think about a Monet painting, it's a similar kind of style, but the Macchiaioli in Italy didn't take it quite that far. So Telemaco Signorini, when he decided this is what he was going to do, he discovered the Ligurian coast. And he went to Rio Majore. This is Rio Majore. And he was there and made a huge impression on him. He kept notes, he had a diary, he did sketches, he did lots of paintings. So you can see this one, just a kind of a quiet view of the city of Rio Majore, the town that is, quite different from the grand view of Florence, right? Three guys, with their backs to you. He did these two paintings, just kind of everyday folks going about their life, these little kids, just kind of hanging out. On the left, I love that painting. You can see here, the protagonist here is not so much that little boy, the protagonist is the sunlight. And it's just amazing how he really created all those forms with light. Gorgeous painting. And that luscious canvas on the right with an older boy kind of leaning back there on that stone wall. I love the way he created those forms. You can really get that idea of kind of laying down contrasting colors in the white shirt of the boy. Just like, again, the macchie of color. So beautiful. I love that painting. So again, the subject matter was kind of important to them. They didn't want to do these important historical scenes. They were really interested in contemporary history, kind of quiet scenes. This is just the folks in Rio Majore at the end of the day. They're poor farmers. They're all barefooted. The men are sitting around smoking. The women are sitting, but they're sewing. They're not, women's work is never done. So the women are back there sewing. A couple of them have their laundry or whatever, maybe some vegetables on their heads. He also did a lot of social commentary, not so much in Rio Majore, but he was known for doing things like painting the interior of a women's insane asylum, that kind of thing. I mean, this is kind of what these guys were working on. The scenes he was painting in Rio Majore were more kind of quiet country scenes. Here's another one. Women just kind of sitting out on their street doing, sewing or doing their chores. Gorgeous, gorgeous play of colors here too. Look at the way the grays on the right are balanced out with that little bit of red brick on the left. Beautiful paintings. And then here's a couple more scenes of Rio Majore. Again, folks just kind of hanging out. And then I love that one on the right that shows you where they just, just drag their boats up. That's, there is no big harbor. They just have this kind of it's called an atraco, just kind of a little launch pad basically. And they just, haul their boats up so they don't get washed back out. He was also really just kind of captivated by the landscape, which in fact is absolutely gorgeous. And that's kind of why we all go there today, right? Some interesting, again, remember the time periods, right? So most people are accustomed to seeing paintings like this, okay? This is kind of what's normal. If you go to an art gallery or something, this is what artists do. Well, here he is, he's doing this. So he's gone out and he's painted this scene of the macchia, again, that word again, that's the scrub that, and in the Mediterranean, it's very particular. It's also very perfumed. You can almost smell it here because this has to be like, late afternoon in July or something. And that hot sun is just baking that hillside. And he's done some interesting things here. One is the composition itself. So the earth actually does go just precipitously down and lands in the sea. So there's this kind of, kind of offset of the composition. And he's really balanced it with this stone wall where he's standing. And then in the back, there's that haze. This is not an overexposed photograph. This is the haze, that sunlight kind of bleaching out to white in the distance. And those two corners kind of anchor that painting. as everything just sort of tumbles down to the sea. And he starts out in the foreground, which is in the upper right, with that fig tree. It's relatively detailed and it's got some good strong color. And then as he heads towards the sea and goes sort of more towards the background, the colors, it's just like they're melting under the sun. And they just sort of, even the houses just kind of blur on into the sea. And he does a similar thing here. Uh-oh, excuse me. Here we are. This is one of the first images that he conceived of when he was in Rio Majori. And we actually have a diary entry. He took that hike up to the sanctuary of Monterosso above Rio Majori. You see the village down there in that V shape. And he wrote in his diary that it was the il più ammirevole colpo d'occhio mai visto. It's the most impressive sight he's ever seen. He was really taken with this. And he went so far as to describe how he saw the little clutch of houses right here. He says that the little white houses are like a polverino bianchiccia tra il verde delle vigne. It's like they're like a little white powder bordered by the green vineyards. And he's also, of course, painted the vineyards. And you can see that the entire hillside, all of it, the entire hillside is covered with terraces, and they're farming those terraces. That's where these people are kind of, making their living. And they have vegetable gardens, they have citrus trees, olive trees, and it's mostly grapes. It's kind of their cash crop. And they've been trading wine out of here since Roman days. They actually found, there are amphorae in Pompeii from Corniglia. Corniglia was owned by the gens Corniglia, so a Roman family. So this is the way that same, so I'm going to show you, this is Rio Majori. If you just kind of go down the hill over here, you get this view. So it looks quite similar today. You can see that there's been, some of those terraces aren't being worked and the forest has just kind of come, taken back over. Here, from here on up is just forest. This is the hiking trail, by the way, here. So when you're hiking through there, you actually see there are people who are actually, recovering the terraces. They're, cutting down the trees. They're repairing the walls. They're planting vegetable gardens, which you see on the upper right. In the center, you see a brand new vineyard that was just planted. And all of this work is really important because this is an extremely delicate ecosystem, to the point where if a wall collapses at the top of the hill, it could literally cause a landslide that goes all the way down to the sea and just take out everything in its path. And similarly, if a terrace collapses at the bottom of the hill, it could just destabilize the entire thing. And again, you're at risk of a landslide. So there's this really sort of interesting kind of collective transformation and now maintenance of this just entire, hillside, for the common good, right? It's a monumental man-made work, but they're doing it, they've done this transformation because they had to farm something, and there was no way to farm if they didn't make some little flat spaces where they could plant stuff. So, I mean, it's considered, a matter of necessity, no farms, no food, they had to plant. So they figured out a way to create these terraces, and it's kind of a big deal. So I'm going to show you how they do it. What they actually do, it's kind of shocking when you actually see what they do. They start out by preparing a little spot and building a wall. You can see that here. And then they have to fill that in with dirt. So they actually get dirt. All the rocks are on site. They just hack the rocks out. They build a wall and they sift dirt to get all the rocks out of it, layer it with organic material to kind of fill in a terrace so that you have a place to plant. And then they build another wall. And then they do the same thing, they fill that one in too. And they just march up the hill and do that. There were 5,000 acres covered with these terraces. And it is quite, I'm going to show you how they build the walls because it's really cool. So first of all, like I said, it's actually, you cannot abandon these vineyards because they're just going to have landslides. I mean, you're going to literally lose the villages. So the National Park of the Cinque Terre has a program for maintenance of these walls, and they're teaching the local community how to build and also maintain the walls. And they've actually published this kind of a manual. So how do we do this? First of all, they show you the tools that are used. So all materials are found on site: dirt, stones. We have that. These are the tools they use. Nothing mechanized. They're literally, picks and hammers and a little basket. That's it. Here's their rendering for how they, on the left there, you see how they create the foundation depending on what's underneath it. If you're laying a foundation onto stone, you just have to kind of hack into the stone a little bit to set your wall. If you're putting the foundation into earth, you have to go down this much farther until you find compact dirt so that you can then set the foundation of this wall. The walls, the part that we see is this facing. This is about 3 feet deep though. So there's stones placed 3 feet deep into the wall. And then they also recommend this kind of 10-degree incline to contrast the force of the earth. And then think about when it rains, how heavy all this is, and it wants to go down the hill. So if this is too vertical, you're going to get a bulge, and then it's just going to go down the hill, and there you are at the landslide again. So they're being very careful about, you know, even the grade of the angle of the walls that are being built into the hillside. So I'm going to show you a couple different kinds of walls. This one is called Razoterra, because the earth that you see where you plant your vineyard or your vegetable garden, and it's flush with the top of the wall. Well, there's another type that is called testa di muro alzato, and this is used in certain instances where the wind would hurt the crops. So they've actually got the head of the top of the wall pops up over the level of the dirt. So the wind floats over and doesn't, you know, just ruin your grapes. They've also, they also use this to channel water. They're very worried about drainage, and they're very, very, very careful about how they create all the drainage systems. So here's that Razoterra wall again. And everything they're doing here is to make sure that the mountainside stands up and that most of this is drainage. So all of these little, they call it the fill, is for drainage. And then down here, there's this little channel, so they can then channel and then channel into another channel and just get it out to the sea without bringing down the mountainside. So this is looking at a section of the wall. This is where you plant. This is a section of the dry stone wall. Again, there's no mortar here. They're just placing stones. So if you look straight onto the wall, you see it like this: big stones at the bottom, smaller and smaller and smaller stones, and then those topper stones at the top are kind of big. So the next image, last one, I promise, is looking straight down at the topper stones. And here's how you're supposed to do it. The correct way is on the left, and the errato, or incorrect way, is on the right. And what they're worried about is drenaggio. They're worried about drainage. They want to make sure that the water can seep through here and go down and fall down into that little channel so they can get it out without the entire terrace just kind of exploding from the pressure of, you know, what's going to be mud back there if you don't have the drainage properly. So if you lay your stones this way instead of this way, it's errato. You've got no drainage and you're in trouble. So here again is what these things look like, what the terraces look like. So these guys are still farming the way they did centuries and centuries ago. No mechanization, everything's done by hand, super hard work. You know, they're not making a lot of money. There's not a big margin going on here. This is an example of grape harvest. So wine is pretty much their main crop. And this is known as viticultura heroica, heroic viticulture. And it definitely is. Look at these guys with their super heavy baskets and crates full of grapes. They've organized this nice little way to get those grapes down to the cellar though. So this is a monorail. And when you're hiking, you actually have to kind of, you know, step over the monorail every now and again, because they have this little train that, you know, you literally just load your grapes on and it takes it down. Look at that, how steep that is. You know, it's like a roller coaster, right? You're like boom, right down to the cellar. The grapes here are mostly white. You can see that. They're Albarola, Bosco, and Vermentino for the most part. So this is another view of the coastline by Telemaco Signorini. So interestingly, even slow food, for example, participate in the economy and kind of help these farmers so that you're actually maintaining the environment. So a way to participate then is to purchase food made by these local farms. I actually have some wine. I'll give you all the name of the place in a minute. I think I have it typed in somewhere. Where did I put that? No. Well, I'll get that to y'all. Okay, I'll send that to you tomorrow, because you can actually order directly from Cinque Terre. There's it's called Viticoltori Riuniti. You know, it's a co-op of all the local farmers, and you know, they have wines, pesto, olives, olive paste, whatever. So we're actually going to make pesto though. So I'm going to show y'all how to make pesto, and we're going to eat it on Testaroli, which is a cool crepe that they make in this area. And it's really interesting. It's dates back to Roman days. And I'm kind of surprised that it's not more widespread. You don't ever see this anywhere but in Liguria, or maybe even like the northern part of Tuscany in that southern part of Liguria. But they use what they call a testo, which is this cast iron pan that obviously gets put on a fire. And so what comes out of the testo is the testarolo. So testaroli are these big round crepes that are cut into these lozenge shapes, and they boil them as if they were pasta. So it's this funny little baked boiled crepe. And we're going to put pesto on that. And then we're also going to eat anchovies. Quick thing, we'll show you some real anchovies in a second. These are from the Mare Ligure, right off the coast there that we just looked at. And here are the recipes that we're going to make today, and all of the ingredients we're going to use. It's super simple. I mean, I was looking at the recipe list. I mean, there's just like nothing that's not. It's just the simplest thing you can possibly make. But the flavors are just to die for. All right, so I'm going to make pesto first. Lorenzo, come va? Va bene così o lo alzo?
No, va bene. Puoi alzarlo un po' se vuoi.
Grazie. I need to, there we go, get my screen where I can see it. Okay, good. So we're gonna make pesto. So pesto is also an ancient Roman recipe. They made something, they called it moretu, which is after the mortar. We call it pesto, which is after the pestle. So anything that's pestled is pesto. And we're gonna make pesto genovese. So genovese style pesto is actually very close to the moretum that the Romans made, because it's just a kind of a smashed blend of herbs and cheese. So we're going to do it the Genovese style, which is sweet basil. And here's sweet basil. My sweet basil is not big enough, so I had to buy some. So I bought it from the store, grocery, just the regular grocery. And I just want to show y'all, this is how it comes with the rubber band around it. And then when you open it up, look, let's see, hang on. Look, it's plants. You can go plant it. So I like picked off almost all the leaves, but I'm just gonna stick these down in the dirt. Now I'm gonna have like a forest of sweet basil. I'm gonna use basil, salt, pine nuts, cheese, and olive oil. And I'm not gonna use garlic because I don't really care for it. And that's actually traditional. They offer it with or without basil. And garlic. And I'm just not into the garlic so much. And the garlic tends to get kind of acrid as it sits. It's kind of nice to let it sit so the flavors meld, and you can just keep it in the fridge for a couple of days or freeze it. But if the garlic's in there, I just don't think it has very clean flavor for very long. So I'm gonna put in some big salt, chunky sea salt, and that's gonna kind of give me some friction here. And I'm gonna first just smash up the basil, and then when it's almost all the way to a paste, I'm gonna add the pine nuts. So the reason I'm doing this is I'm kind of mortar and pestle really pulls out the essential oils, and so the flavor of all these ingredients. And here it really pulls out the oil of the pine nut and really kind of almost makes an emulsion. The pine nut does amazing things when it's smashed. When you chop it, it's just like a chopped nut, but when you smash it, it turns into a cream. And I think that's kind of the key here. Hence, as Lorenzo said, don't use a don't use a food processor for your pesto. Giusto, Lorenzo?
Giusto. Never.
Never.
And
he's very decisive.
And me is one that prefer to use garlic in pesto. Because the original one is with garlic, but if you have to kiss someone, it's better to don't use garlic.
I have seen the non-garlic pesto often up there, so I'm not so sure. I mean, garlic is traditional too, but I think it's just as traditional to not use garlic. So you want to choose, if you have a choice, the most delicate leaves, because it's already done. I mean, it's just reduced. I'm just going to show you how much. Remember that huge handful of basil? It's not quite there yet, but I'm about to add the pine nuts. I just want to show you what it did. So it's turned into that. And it's kind of made there's a little liquid in there too. So the liquid from just the kind of very fresh, tender leaves is going to mix with the essential oils that are pulled out of the pine nuts. And that's what's going to make it so nice and creamy. I'm also going to use olive oil, but it starts out with the emulsion, with just literally the kind of the juice from the basil leaves and the pine nuts. I'm going to add some more. So you kind of want to get it to where it's sort of light green. We're also going to add a bunch of cheese. That helps.
You use coarse salt or fine salt?
Coarse salt. I'm literally doing that for the friction. So if you start with garlic, you would do, if you want to use garlic, you would start with just the garlic and salt and just mash it to a good paste. That way you're not eating bits of garlic. You're actually just making a nice paste out of the garlic. So at least it gets spread around really well. I of course skipped that step.
Someone asked if you roast the pine nuts.
No, raw pine nuts. I'm going to show you what this looks like now. So it's already, I tend to be kind of lazy with this because I don't mind if it's chunky, but I'm going to try to make it a little bit smoother for y'all. The tender leaves really work well, and it goes so fast. And if the leaves aren't tender, then what you can do is tear out the back, that kind of the spine here, and just kind of get rid of it, so that when you're trying to smash it, you're not trying to smash this real fibrous bit. Sometimes even just when I'm picking them, I just grab it so I can just pull off the leaf so I don't have to deal with that, because that's the last thing to smash. So if you eliminate the little fiber, you don't have to worry about it. Okay. Let me put this into a bowl so y'all can see what it looks like. So this is kind of step one. So it's already nice. Look how thick it is. It's already a nice thick cream, and it's you look at it. Look at what it's leaving on the bottom of it. You can kind of see how it made that emulsion. So next step then is to add a large amount of cheese. I'm using a blend of Parmesan cheese and Pecorino Romano for some tang. I'm just going to smash this in here, and then I'm going to add olive oil. And you just kind of want to add enough olive oil to make kind of a thick, not too runny sauce, but this is now super thick. So I'm going to add some more pecorino. I like it to be kind of strong. Also, because I don't have any garlic, so I'm adding kind of proportionally more pecorino. All these recipes are kind of, I'm going to give you amounts as a guide, but you can kind of just do it to taste and kind of eye it. This is best made ahead a little bit because the olive oil absorbs all these flavors, particularly the basil. And if you're using the garlic, also the garlic. So I'm using the most delicate of Sagona olive oils. That's the olive oil that I make at the farm down near Arezzo. So it's a Tuscan oil. It's the Lecchino variety called Casamona, our most delicate olive oil, which is not super delicate. It stands up to this really well, but if you were in Liguria, you would be using a Ligurian olive oil, such as one that comes from the Cinque Terre. And I'll actually send you a link for that tomorrow as well. All those products are readily available in the United States. And here, you can also, if you're in Italy, you can order directly from these consortiums in the Cinque Terre, and they deliver it right to your house. Very convenient. Okay, so there's the pesto. We're gonna let that sit. So, it's still quite thick, super thick. In fact, so what you do when you cook with it is you're gonna thin it out with a little bit of cooking water from the pasta or from the Testaroli, whichever one you're making. So that's the pesto. I'm going to show y'all now. This is so typical. Marinated anchovies are super typical on menus, really in Italy in the summer, but specifically on the coast, of course. And then in that area, they actually fish for anchovies in that area. And they use a method called a lampara, which is they fish at night, and they use a light that attracts the fish. See if I can get this out of here. I had them sitting on ice, but my ice melted. There we go. So here are my fish. They were fished on Thursday. I would have preferred that they were fished last night, but here are my cute little anchovies. They're so good. So these are great, flavorful fish. They're also sustainable. They're not endangered species at all. So much of the fish we eat, the fish populations, especially in the Mediterranean, are declining, but not these. So these are kind of the good fish to eat. And we're going to make them, like I said, kind of like ceviche, and they're just getting marinated in lemon juice. This is also from the Cinque Terre, by the way. So I'm going to make little fillets, and then we'll marinate them under lemon juice, and we'll just put a little bit of kind of flavoring on top. And so the way to do that is just clean the fish. Can y'all see me well enough? If I just, I can't do this much closer, I don't think. You just want to kind of break off the head.
Ce la fai dopo farlo vedere più vicino?
Non lo so, fammi fare uno poi provo. I'll try to show you one a little bit closer up. I don't want to make a large mess because it's goopy. So head and guts come out. Open it up with your thumb. Remove the backbone. I'm trying to keep it in one piece and I did not succeed. Lorenzo, hai diviso in due. So this is this is how it is when it's done. I'll show it to you, and I'll try to do another one closer up. So there it is when it's done. Notice the color too. Kind of that beautiful kind of rosy color. All right, prova di fare. I'm gonna try to do one. Let's see.
Soprattutto la prima parte.
Okay. I'm gonna stand like this. Okay, so from here you just kind of go for it. See, slippery. And then use your finger to kind of scoop out the innards. I'm still attached. I'm not doing a very good job. There. This is a meaty one.
Perfect.
Open it up and then get rid of the backbone. It's very slippery. Sorry. I can't stand here and do this. It's like slipping out of my hands. I did a good, hang on a second, this is a good one. This is the goal is to keep the tail on one end and then have it just be opened up and be in one sheath like that. They sell these, actually I think they're sardines that they sell in Sicily like this. So they're called a linguate because once they're opened up like this, it looks like a lingua, it looks like a tongue. So when they open them up, they're a linguate. So we eat a lot of anchovies over here. Again, like I said, they're sustainable fishing. We get them locally, obviously. And they're full of, they're really tasty, and they're full of all these minerals and vitamins, which Lorenzo's going to tell us about.
Yeah,
Giusto.
Giusto. Anchovy is very important for the economy of Liguria. And they call, you have to think that they call the bread of the sea. And they are very rich of protein and vitamin B and E and selenium plus iron, zinc, potassium, calcium, omega-3 and fatty acids. And it's important to know that I read these. I don't know into my mind, so because I don't eat a lot of anchovy, so I need to read. If I eat a lot of anchovy,
right, you do.
Yeah.
They're also because they're tiny. There's no problem, or there's very low issue with heavy metals. You know, bigger fish have heavy metals, and we've all kind of, I think, known, to avoid eating, lots of swordfish and whatnot because of the heavy metal content. These don't have that problem. Actually, there's a good one. I kept it all together. All right, one more, and then so what happens then is these get put under lemon juice. They sit for at least 5 hours and up to overnight, and they cook, right? So the citric acid of the lemon juice cooks, basically transforms the flesh of the fish as if it were cooked with flame, but it's not, it's cooked with acid. So there's those. I'm gonna wash my hands and I'll show you what they look like after they've been sitting under the
May I use this time? May I use this time to say that you use a very wonderful marble mortar. So it's very important to know that I hate blender sometimes. I use blender for some recipe, but not if I make pesto. It's the same if you have to blend mint for mojito. It's better to don't use the blender. And it's very it's very simple to find a mortar is very expensive. Expensive è economico o è caro?
No, no, inexpensive.
Inexpensive.
It's not
Sorry. For example, my mortar, I buy it in a school, because in Carrara that it's wonderful. Sorry.
Un attimo solo. So just notice the difference between the ones I just peeled, or you don't really peel them, cleaned, and then these guys have been sitting under lemon juice all night. I did them last night, so it's about not quite 24 hours. But you notice the difference, and you can tell they've actually been transformed. So while Lorenzo tells you about the mortar and pestle school, I'm gonna just put some anchovies and garlic and olive oil here, and that's how these are going to be eaten. Okay.
So in Carrara, that's the home of the marble. You can find some high school that the people going to start to learn how to work marble. So very near the quarries, it's possible to find some laboratories where you can see what the students make and you can buy. So I find some mortar and I buy one of them. So I use in my house, I use a marble mortar that some student make. So it's you can find it. So it's very interesting.
I think that's very cool. Lorenzo's going to try to give me the link for that, and I can send it. If he doesn't put it up right now, I can send it to you tomorrow. I think that's very interesting. My mortar and pestle and mine came from some antique store. It was used in an old pharmacy. They were actually making medicines and whatnot in the mortar and pestle, and they're actually pretty common over here. If you go on eBay, you can get a very nice old mortar and pestle. So this is just the topping for kind of added flavor to the anchovy. So the anchovies that have been sitting all night with just lemon juice are going to get a little bit of added flavor. And I'm going to just do some garlic, not very much. I'm going to do like not even half a clove. This is a big clove. And I'm going to smash it with salt to make a paste. And then I'm going to mix it up with just a little bit of parsley, and we'll put some olive oil in there. You could also use some hot pepper, but I'm going to skip that tonight. This is an alternate way to make a paste out of garlic if you're not using the mortar and pestle. So just smash it with some salt, again for friction, and use the flat part, the blade of the knife, just kind of make a paste. Again, by doing that, you can kind of distribute the flavor better, so you don't actually have to take a bite of garlic. You just get good garlic flavor. I'm going to use just a little bit of parsley. And get a little bowl. Again, I'm using the Casamona Lecchino variety olive oil, the really kind of more delicate olive oil, because all these flavors are so strong. The olive oil doesn't really need to stand out. It's the anchovy that stands out. And again, Ligurian olive oil, you can actually find that in the United States or here in Italy, obviously. And Ligurian oil is super, super delicate. It's made out of Tajasca olives, which have a totally different flavor than the spicy Tuscan oil. I'm just going to kind of try to give everybody a little bit of.
Elaine, Anne asked, are fresh anchovies naturally salty?
No, not really. No, they have a little, sea flavor, but no, they're not super salty. In fact, I added salt. And this is literally a fresh fish. So the salted, the preserved anchovies have been preserved under salt. Those are salty. No, these are not super salty. Okay, I'm so proud. Look, Lorenzo's gonna be jealous again. I can't tip it too far because I'm gonna dribble all over my computer. Doesn't that look good?
Perfect.
Kind of glaring. I know there's some glare.
No, va bene.
Okay, good. All right, so now we're gonna make these interesting, I'm gonna wash my hands again. So I'm gonna show you how to make these testaroli. So pesto, meanwhile, can be eaten, even on a cracker or on, boiled potato or on a piece of chicken. It's just, it's a very good, super flavorful condiment. A little bit goes a long way. You can also eat it on pasta. And the typical pasta that they use in Liguria is called trofie. And you'll see that these little tiny little kind of rolled pieces of pasta. So this is trofie. And so if you're going to have pasta in Liguria, oftentimes your pesto would be on trofie. And they also do this really nice thing. And I don't know why they do this, but when they make pasta with pesto into the water, the boiling water with the hard pasta, they throw in little kind of just like shards of potato, little pieces of potato, and a couple of green beans. And so then when everything comes out, you toss everything together, and not many, everybody gets sort of 1 or 2 green beans on their plate of pasta, and then maybe a piece of potato, and then some of the potato kind of, you know, falls apart and kind of makes the sauce thicker. It all kind of just does this thing all together. So it's kind of nice. We're not going to make pasta though. We're going to make testaroli, which are the Roman crepe. So I've made a couple. You can see them here. And this is literally just a super simple batter of flour. And it's not hard wheat flour, just regular old soft wheat flour, just like y'all, you know, just like you make biscuits out of, just what, you know, whatever you make a cake out of. It's literally flour, water, and salt. And so I've made it ahead of time because y'all don't need to see me stir water and flour. And it's also nice to let it sit for several hours. This enzymatic process takes place kind of like when you let dough rise for a very long time. It's a little bit more digestible if you do it that way. So here's this super liquidy batter. This is going to get cooked. I don't have a testa, so I'm not going to do it on the fire. I'm going to do it in a very large nonstick pan with just a tiny bit of olive oil. You can also use a cast iron pan, but I don't have one that's big enough, so I'm doing it this way. And get it pretty hot, and you want it to be sort of, I don't know, less than a quarter, like sort of 1/8 of an inch thick, a couple millimeters tall. And it's a pretty thick batter, so you don't have to work on that. And it cooks just for a couple minutes per side. Let's see if I can make it round. Like, you know, when you make a crepe.
It's like a big pancake.
It's like a big crepe. No.
Yeah.
Like a big, you know, like a big French crepe, only it's not because there's no egg in here. It's kind of like a big pancake, yeah. So that gets on a pretty high flame. It needs to be kind of golden on each side. We'll flip it in the middle. I'm gonna let it go kind of 3 or 4 minutes on this side, flip it just for another minute or 2, and then it'll be done. Then you want to let it sit. You want to set it aside, and you can actually do it this day before if you want to, because what you do is you cut, after it's kind of cooled, you cut these into the lozenge shape and boil them in salted water as if it were pasta, only you don't boil it for very long. That's kind of the key. So I'm just going to cut these. They're really good, and they kind of have this interesting kind of spongy consistency. It's like really, it's very pleasant to eat. And like I said, I don't know why you don't find these anywhere else but in Liguria. Lorenzo, lo sai te perché?
Perché cosa?
Perché non si mangia testaroli in altre zone, o con altri sughi, per dire. Sono buonissimi. Nessuno lo fa.
I think the difference is because in other parts of Italy, you find a lot of eggs, for example. So it's very too easy to make some fresh pasta than testaroli. If you think of how is made Liguria, for example, I think it's not usually, you cannot find in ancient time a lot of chicken, for example. So they have a lot of flour and oil and basil also, and so it's very, this is like a pasta made not in the oven but in the it's very difficult to say how you cannot find testaroli. It's, for example, it's the same to say why lasagna is only in the Emilia Romagna, for example. It's very.
But lasagna is not only in Emilia Romagna. That's the point.
I think it depends on, you use testo and testo when you cook testarolo is the same that in other part of Liguria they make for example, the same with the flour of chestnut. They make, for example, migliacci or this is the same things, but they don't use like pasta. The strange is not how you find the testaroli. Is the strange is used instead of pasta, so boiled because it's a kind of bread. For example, this is a kind of bread. If you think.
No, but there's no. Is there any other Italian food that is even similar to this?
No. No, I think it's very similar to the for example, for the Jewish bread.
Oh, that's interesting. Although they usually boil the dough, and they're actually boiling the cooked bread. It's just kind of bizarre. I don't know. I can't think of anything else, any other recipe that's similar to this. And anyway, I'm gonna boil these. They get boiled for literally a minute because they'll kind of fall apart. So they don't get boiled for very long. You just kind of want to heat them all the way through. When this is golden, I'm going to flip it. Not quite. I'm just let everything heat up. So I'm going to boil the testaroli as soon as the water boils, and then toss them with a little bit of pasta with pesto. The pesto gets put in the bottom of a serving bowl. And then you want to loosen it up with a little bit of cooking water. So I'm going to do that just that way you can make sure it spreads. You don't use very much. Pesto is so kind of potent. You just want to barely coat the food. And let's see, this is pretty much going. I was going to say, if y'all want to ask any questions while I'm doing this, because it's just kind of.
You can say that if you make pesto, you can fridge it if you don't use it all. So it's very easy to take a little portion of pesto and freeze.
Yes, you can like put it in ice cube trays and then freeze it, and then that's going to be too much.
Elaine?
I'm just making. Yes.
The anchovies are they similar to what we had in Venice with assaor, as they call it over there?
No, saor is actually cooked with heat. They're actually kind of little, usually I think fried anchovies served with caramelized onions. So that's totally different. This is literally like ceviche that you eat in Mexico. So yeah, different.
Oh, good job. Good flip.
Thanks.
By the way, that tuna that we had in LA last week, it was just
Oh,
it was wonderful.
Good. Oh, so they made the tuna al mutonato.
Yeah.
So these are done. They're kind of floating to the top. I don't want them to fall apart, so I'm just going to take them right out.
So is that enough pasta water just from your strainer there that would do?
Yes, yeah. There's liquid coming off of these, so since I'm taking them out directly from the pan, I didn't put them in a colander. And this is a good way to do this for any pasta when you want some water to stick, which is almost all your pasta. Take them out with a scooper or with a tongs. Let me see. I need to toss this with something. This gets topped with cheese, so I'm going to go get some cheese. So the testarolo is kind of, like I said, it's a little bit spongy. It's kind of got this very interesting, I'm going to see if I can show y'all a cut side. It's kind of hard. I don't know if y'all can see that, especially through the steam. It's really a pleasant consistency. Just making sure it's all kind of coated. This is not a pretty process here, but there's testaroli coated with pesto, and then
would that be considered a primo?
This is a primo for sure. Yes, primo, and then a little swirl of fresh olive oil. Ooh. And there you go. Testaroli with pesto.
Look good.
Y'all have any questions?
It looks like the appetizer we made with the chickpea flour, except boiled. That's what it looks like.
It does. I know, you're right. But it would be as if you took that out of the oven and then boiled it. And like, whoever thought, it's bizarre. Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, you could try that too.
Hey, Elaine, you know, we had the best anchovies in Manarola when we were there.
Uh-huh,
Now
uh-huh.
they had the lemony, you know, they were served that way. Do they do it ceviche style other places?
Yes. Yeah, they do. I mean, you find that in like in Naples and most of the coastal towns will serve marinated anchovies. I mean, anchovies are super. You know, like I said, they have high population in the Mediterranean, so they catch them everywhere. So here in the summer, you know, if you go eat somewhere on some coastal area, you always end up with, you know, a starter of marinated anchovies, which you just eat with bread. And every time I get them, we always end up ordering a second plate. That's how good they are. We're like, no, wait a second. Can you just bring us the second order, please? And every time I order those, we end up getting 2 orders of them because they're just so good. Everybody's like.
So I guess, where do you recommend that we get them in Jackson?
Where do they fish anchovies? And there must be anchovies over there.
From the Pearl River.
Those are minnows.
Does the Gulf of Mexico doesn't have anchovies?
I don't think
They have
so.
to be cold water. I'm not sure where they get fished.
We'll ask them at Joe Patty's. Maybe they have some.
You can ask. The thing is, they do need to be really fresh. So you might just have to come to Italy and eat them.
We're ready. We're ready.
We're ready.
I
We've
can
been
hook you up,
vaccinated.
so.
We're ready. We're waiting on the next virus.
Don't say that.
And the vino.
Oh, thank you. The vino. The vino is. Haven't opened it, but I'm about to. It's Cinque Terre Costa de Campo, and this is the Viticultore Riuniti. So the group of farmers that farm those hillsides there between Manarola, Corniglia, Vernazza, and this is their kind of co-op cantina.
Huh.
And they'll actually send it right to you. I'm going to give y'all the link tomorrow. It's really interesting. I mean, they're right there. They're at like Volastro, which is the little town between Manarola and Corniglia, if any of y'all have ever done that walk. And they have the Joe's like, no, I was sitting on the coast eating anchovies.
I was
I know
sitting
where you
down.
were.
I was sitting down low, drinking wine, watching them. I got my exercise that way.
Well, so you can. So they sell wine. You can order wine. You can also order little olives. These little Tajasca olives. I love them. Little baby black Tajasca olives. They're so good. They're very different from other kinds of olives. And you can also, they make what do you call it? Pate olive paste. There's a word for that. It's a French word. Tapenade, yes. And then if you want to be lazy about it, you can just buy pesto, but you're still helping out the farmers. So I will allow it, okay? I won't make fun of you if you buy the pesto instead of making the pesto. Okay.
If we buy their pesto, we know it's got the right ingredients, right? Because it might be difficult to source here. So
actually, I think you can find everything. I think you can find, because it's Pecorino Romano cheese is super easy to find in the United States. Parmigiano, pine nuts, the basil, olive oil. You can literally find all of that. But what you need is the mortar and pestle, and Lorenzo's going to hook you up with the source for the mortar and pestle.
yay.
So, okay. Y'all, thanks so much for being here. Any more questions?
Thank you.
What olive oil did you use
so
the same olive oil on both the anchovies and the pesto?
I did, and I used our Sagona olive oil, and I used Casamona, which is the Lecchino cultivar, because it's the most kind of delicate of the 3 oils that we make. So I chose the more delicate one.
One more thing. There's a lot of kind of basil in Italy, so you can find a lot of kind of basil. It depends normally of the shape and the size of the leaves. Usually in Liguria, the leaves are very small and very and the smell is very incredible. Very
right.
So,
but aren't they kind of like flat and round? They're not those pointy ones. Giusto, Lorenzo? The Ligurian ones. The Ligurian ones are kind of tondi e piatti, non sono quelli a punta.
Exactly.
So there's another kind of basil that we see here a lot that is the leaves are pointy. That's a more narrow, pointy leaf, and it's more of a minty, strong flavor. This is a more kind of a broad, rounded leaf and has a more delicate kind of, basil flavor. So,
it's very important to take the leaves before it become flower.
Yes,
it's very important.
Yes. Yes, important to take the leaves before it flowers. And like, again, the more tender leaves are much easier to turn into pesto. So if you're picking off of your own basil plants, you might avoid the kind of thicker, tougher leaves.
And would you ever put some mint in there as well? Or would you make just?
You could put some mint in there. You don't want it to be too aggressive. One thing I put in there sometimes is hot pepper. I'll put in a hot pepper.
Make pesto.
Oh.
Lorenzo's like, no.
No. If you have to make pesto, you have to use basil.
Lorenzo, un po' di peperoncino? Un po' di peperoncino ci sta.
You can use all ci sta tutto, but if you have to make very original pesto,
right, so,
you have to use garlic, basil.
So no, none of that. However, though, once you have your mortar and pestle, so we call this pesto genovese, right?
Yeah.
This is basil and pine nuts and the other things.
Yeah.
But you can also make a pesto of, for example, arugula and almonds.
Yeah.
Or you can make a pesto of trapanese, which is garlic and almonds. Or you can even make a salad dressing that is, hazelnuts and I don't know, arugula or whatever. I mean, you can mint. I often do that actually. Mint and hazelnuts mashed up in the mortar and pestle to be a salad dressing.
Usually I say that pesto is mean beat it. So the name of pesto is that when you use mortar, it's like you have to punch someone. So if you make in Sicily, you have to use the ingredients that you find in Sicily, for example. But now, normally we call pesto the Ligurian one, but you can find in a lot of part of Italy the other recipe of pesto. So
right. So again, pesto just means that it was pestato using
And no one uses blender. No one uses blender.
No one. No, you use this.
Yeah. And if I have my marble, and because also if you use a blender, it's very easy to have a black pesto, because the basil leaves change color.
Right. Notice how beautiful green. Look at my pesto, it's beautiful and green.
Yeah, it rests green. Don't become black.
Right.
Does mortar take on the flavors that you've been banging around in it?
I try to clean the mortar pretty dang quickly. And the only time I had any trouble with that was I left some cumin in there once.
Ooh.
No. So yeah, I try to just take a sponge and wipe it out real quick. I mean, no, it does. I mean, it's marble, but I don't know, it kind of almost has like a patina, so that it doesn't really. But like you might want to strong flavors like cumin, get it out of there real fast.
Elaine,
it lingers.
Elaine, I think I remember right? Someone said that putting that little bit of potato in the water, as you mentioned earlier, that has an effect helping the pesto not to turn dark.
I don't think so, because the pesto turns dark before that. And I've read a couple of different things about the basil turning dark. One is apparently if it's wet, like if you have washed it, make sure you dry it really well, or just let it sit until it's dry. Because if you mash it up when it's wet, that's going to help. It's an enzymatic something that happens. So water is going to help it turn black. And then also, like the you don't want to cut the leaves up and let them sit there, because they'll turn black. So you smash them all right away, you can maintain the greenness. And I have had it turn black in the food processor also, and that's what back in the day and before. But literally, the mortar and pestle, y'all, it's worth it. I was telling Lorenzo before, like if my house catches on fire, that's what I'm grabbing on the way out the door. Okay.
Well, it's the only thing that wouldn't burn. For the pesto.
That's what Lorenzo said.
Yeah. And I'm very happy to tell you that next time we introduce a lesson of 5 minutes of my Italian English for it. So if you
what is this? What? I don't know about this.
I teach you how to speak English with like me. It's very terrible.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Right.
Anyway, sign in. If you sign in 5 minutes early, you get a broken English lesson.
Okay, then Lorenzo gets to hear my broken Italian. Have a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, but I have to study in my school English, so it's not.
See,
my son listen to me, so but he doesn't understand. So he stopped to study English if he listen how I say. So it's better to I stopped.
Thanks, y'all. This is a lot of fun.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, see y'all next time.
Bye.
Bye. Grazie a tutti.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Grazie, Elaine.
Prego. Alla prossima. Bye.
Bye. Grazie.